Okay, so naka-start tayo sa JFB Live. In 4 minutes, i-start ni.
Hello to everyone. Gawi-gawis ay agaw kanda takaw ati. I am Bran, one of your hosts for today.
Welcome to the 4th episode of the Dad at the DOST Scholar, a DOST Scholar's story. Ako po si Novi.
Before we begin our new episode for the Dad at the DOST Scholar, let us all bow our heads for a moment of prayer.
Idayaw minagan mo Naneng ka ng bindisyonan, ili ay kaigurutan. Mm, mm, mm. Iyaman, iyaman ken Diyos Ama. Mm, mm, mm. Nan entakuna dagupan, dadat ayen dakanan, daidis imnas balbalala, imnas balbala si basem, o imnas ay. Dadama, dadamanan layad mi. Mm, mm, mm. Sineng ka ng banbantayan, tumunggal sa ay anak mo. Mm, mm, mm. Diyos Ama, Diyos amay wadadaya, siya nan en miluwalu. Mm, mm, mm. Pigsalaing nan mawawada, kenda kami ay wadas na, daidis imnas balbalala, imnas balbala si basem, o imnas ay.
Welcome po sa lahat ng ating viewers for today. The DOST-CAR, mostly to the DOST-CAR ongoing scholars, the scholar graduates, prospective scholars, staff of the Department of Science and Technology, and the university coordinators. For this activity, we expect that the science and technology undergraduate scholarship programs will be promoted through the story of our graduate scholar today. May it also bring inspiration to our viewer students to pursue science and technology courses during their undergraduate studies. And before we formally open this activity, tawagin po natin si Dr. Nancy E. Bantog, ang Regional Director ng DOST-CAR para sa isang opening message.
Secretary de la Peña, all participants and viewers, good morning to one and all. Today is the 4th episode of the DOST Iskolar, an advocacy platform specific for the DOST Science and Technology Scholarship Program. This activity is done once a month through virtual platform such as this morning. Today, we are very much privileged to have with us the Secretary of the Department of Science and Technology, Professor Fortunato T. de la Peña. We are much honored that he granted our request of gracing this occasion. Further, we are fortunate too for having with us a gentleman and DOST Scholar graduate, Mr. Jeffrey INGOSAN. Notable in this DOST is the active engagement of DOST Scholar graduates who are themselves the advocates of DOST's scholarship program. Looking back, the Science and Technology Scholarship started as early as 1958. It evolved, and fast forward to the current, there are 3 undergraduate scholarship programs specific for the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics degree programs. These are 1, Merit Scholarship Program, 2, RA 7687, and 3, RA 10612. Apart from helping the qualified students finish their degree, central to this DOST scholarship program is to achieve or establish the critical mass base of scientists, engineers, and researchers. Why so biased for these courses? The Philippine Development Plan recognizes the role of science, technology, and innovation in the nation's long-term economic and social progress. Part of the continuing improvement of the scholarship program is the expansion of the coverage of courses for the past recent years, meaning what were not originally included before are now considered as priority courses. This includes pharmacy, medtech, veterinary medicine, agribusiness and entrepreneurial management, animal husbandry, architecture, among others. This means too that any interested senior high school qualifiers will have wider choices of courses to pursue and not the limited engineering and natural sciences courses before. Moving on, the year 2020 was a challenging year due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which forced all organizations, individuals, and institutions to adjust to the new normal. Face-to-face activities and mobility became restricting. Even this year, physical gathering remains a challenge. DOST-CAR, on its part, adapted the virtual platforms to implement its programs, projects, and activities. Thus, this DAD the DOST Iskolar was launched on January 29, 2021. This is a new advocacy initiative of DOST-CAR towards inclusive enhancement of science culture throughout the region. When I say inclusive, the furthest barangay or community in CAR should have been well informed of the DOST scholarship program. With DOST as the premier agency for STI, DOST-CAR remains steadfast in promoting the scholarship program for priority SND courses, engaging the DOST scholar graduates to advocate the scholarship program has not been optimally explored in the past. Today, they volunteer their services to be ambassadors of the scholarship program where they once belonged. No one is better to promote our program than the scholars themselves. Doing this scholarship advocacy will hopefully encourage students to pursue science and technology courses. To the incoming college students who are with us today, be counted in the next 4 or 5 years as one of the DOST scholars. And for you to be later on, be counted as members to the critical mass base of scientists, engineers, and researchers for the country. To all of you, welcome to this 4th DAD at the DOST Scholar. God bless everyone. Matago-tago ako amin.
Salamat po, Director Nancy, sa inspirasyon at direksyon ng inyong mensahe. At ngayon naman, tawagin natin si Ma'am Alicia A. Balacqua, SRS2 at DOST-CAR Scholarship Coordinator para malaman ang aral na mapupulot natin sa programang ito.
The Philippines has 270 research and development personnel per million population. according to UNESCO's 2015 survey of R&D expenditure and human resources. This is below UNESCO's standard of 380 research and development personnel per million population. In the Cordillera Administrative Region, we only have 467 R&D personnel. This is lower than the regional distribution of 13,107 R&D personnel in the country's capital region. Prior to the imposition of travel restrictions and quarantine protocols, the DOST-CAR advocated the agency's scholarship program in order to invite more students and possibly increase the R&D pool of human resources. Among the efforts to promote the scholarship program is the scholarship caravan conducted in all provinces of the region where GDAS were prioritized. With the increasing reach of information technology in the country, the DOST-CAR has launched on January 29, 2021, at the DOST Iskolar as part of its continuing information drive to invite the youth to be scholars for the nation. The term dadat is a Kankanai term that refers to an indigenous knowledge system and practice where the elders in the Cordilleras pass stories through word of mouth and is traditionally done by chanting. Know more about the DOST Scholarship Program through our Regional Scholarship Ambassador for today's episode. Naimbag na agsapa, kinyatayuan.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Alice. At ngayon naman po, ating pong pakinggan ang isang recorded inspirational message from the Secretary of the Department of Science and Technology, Secretary Fortunato E. de la Peña.
Warmest greetings to everyone, particularly to the organizers and participants of the DAD-at-D DOST Iskolar in the Cordillera Administrative Region. Gawis ay agsapa, kenda tako amin. Good morning to everyone. Innovation through technology, networking through collaboration, and intensified focus on scholarship are key elements that help the Department of Science and Technology Science Education Institute perform its mandate in producing a scientifically literate citizenry and in accelerating the much-needed increase in science and technology human resources needed for socio-economic development. The pandemic has certainly altered the way we live our lives. Since the emergence of this dreaded virus in our country, we were forced to operate in the new normal. Community quarantines were imposed and our mobility was restricted. And this has disrupted the social order of human contact and has affected almost all sectors in our society. The education sector was not spared. Schools were closed and students were forced to stay at home, and to some extent this has negatively impacted the mental health of some of our students. Some have even lost their enthusiasm to study and had developed depression. Also, the implementation of distance or remote learning programs has made more apparent the gap between the rich and the poor, the ones who have access to technologies and those who don't. Hence, the need for more proactive interventions from the government. I'm happy to note that the DOST Science Education Institute and our regional offices have always been doing their best to stay on top of things. They have been conducting activities that are aimed at helping our students cope with the new normal, reaching out to them, inspiring them, and encouraging and assisting them to stay on track as we all try to navigate in this new normal and move past this crisis. The DOST Scholar is one of those activities. It is a virtual storytelling initiative that aims to promote the DOST scholarship programs in the region. It also seeks to highlight how our graduate scholars were able to cope with the challenges during their scholarship years. Dadat is a Kankanaey word from the Cordillera, which means a story. Hence, Dadat, this DOST scholar is translated a DOST scholar's story. Traditionally, stories are chanted by one person who knows the Dadat to either entertain or inform the audience. In today's activity, our guest, Jeffrey INGOSAN, will not sing to entertain us, but he will surely share with us his inspiring story. He will walk us down his memory lane and tell us how the DOST scholarship has changed his life and helped him become the successful dean that he is now. I hope that his story will inspire everyone, especially the students. In DOST-CAR's hope to reach as many students and interested stakeholders as possible, this online activity is not only made accessible to those present in this Zoom meeting, as it will be streamed through Facebook as well. I would like to take this opportunity to call on our scholar graduates to continue being our partners in this endeavor. Let us continue to be champions of science, technology, and innovation, not only in the Cordillera region, but in the whole country as well. Mabuhay tayong lahat.
Maraming salamat, Secretary. Kami po ay na-inspire sa iyong mensahe ngayong araw na ito.
At upang formal na ipakilala ating pinangaralan na panauhin, ipinakikilala po namin ang Provincial Director ng Benguet Science and Technology Center, si Dr. Sheila Marie Singaclaver.
Naimbag nga ang sapa kinyatayo amin. Good morning. It is a pleasure for me to introduce our guest for today's episode of DADAT, the DOST Scholar. I am confident that our guest will be a very effective ambassador of the DOST Scholarship Program as he shares his experience on how DOST helped him in his academic journey. In 2004, this DOST Scholar graduated cum laude with the degree Bachelor of Science in Computer Science at the University of the Cordilleras and was one of the 2004 10 outstanding students in CAR. Because learning should never end, our guest has continuously pursued higher education at the University of the Cordilleras. He completed his Master in Computer Science in 2008, is currently completing the project study for his degree in Master in Information Technology, and his dissertation is in progress for the degree in Doctor in Information Technology, this time as a CHED scholar. Meanwhile, he has attended numerous technical conferences, trainings, and workshops in various capacities, both here and abroad. Such activities were integral in honing his skills in the fields of computer science and information technology. Specifically, however, our guest's field of specialization include object-oriented programming, software engineering, project management, systems architecture, and machine learning. In terms of research and development, he has had research undertakings in his field, where one was included in the International Journal of E-Education, E-Business, E-Management, and E-Learning. Rising from the ranks as a faculty member of the University of the Cordilleras in 2004, he now holds a managerial position in the same university. Let us then take this opportunity to learn from Mr. Jeffrey Sakay INGOSAN, former DOST scholar and now Dean of the College of Information Technology and Computer Science, University of the Cordilleras. Let us all give him a warm virtual welcome.
Salamat, Ma'am Sheila. Bago po natin kausapin si Sir Jeff, allow us to present to you a short AVP of our resource speaker for today.
Okay, so good morning, Sir Jeffrey. Welcome
Hello,
to the
good morning.
Yes, sir. Sir, baka may gusto pa po kayong batiin bago po tayo magsimula?
I would want to take this opportunity to say good morning to the organizers of this event. I saw earlier Ma'am Nancy who was logging in. So I guess Ma'am Nancy is able to join us. And I would also want to say good morning to the viewers, our DOST scholars, especially from the region, Cordillera Administrative Region. I know there are also some parents probably and prospect students from the basic education who are interested probably to avail of the scholarship. So good morning to each and one of us.
Okay, sir. So simulan po natin ang ating mga katanungan, mga tanong po para sa iyo na i-share mo po sa ating mga live viewers, sa mga viewers din po dito sa Zoom link na Zoom account natin. Sir, ikwento mo po sa amin ang naging karanasan mo sa pag-apply mo sa DOST scholarship. Bakit po kayo nag-apply dito, sir?
If it was 2001. So probably those who are listening, siguro may mga kapapanganak pa lang that time, especially those who are still on their senior high school. Baka hindi pa nga sila pinapanganak. So it was in 2001 when I finished my high school. And I was looking into possible means, ways to be able to continue with my studies, especially in the tertiary level. I would not say na my family naman is talagang very, very poor. I would not say rin naman my family really is rich. I have a lot of relatives who are doing well. So during those time, I was just relaxed and I was just looking for ways for me to be able to continue with my studies. And I was looking for scholarships. I was looking for opportunities. It even came to my mind to apply as a working scholar. So I was taking that as into consideration. And my last resort siguro that time, if I won't be able to get scholarship, siguro kakapalang ko na lang yung mukha ko to help, ask help from our relatives. So yun yung mindset ko when I was about to graduate from high school. And then from that time, well, I'm not sure with the other provinces in the region, but for schools in Baguio, because I'm a graduate of Baguio City National High School, specifically from Luacan Annex. So when during that time, schools in Baguio were informed, and there were campaigns for DOST scholarship. So I was not initially looking into taking up the DOST scholarship because it did not, and it I guess it does not still cover the degree program that I initially wanted to take. So I was listening to the talk of our guest last week. So na-mention ni attorney, ni judge na gusto din niya atang mag-accountancy that time. So I do not know why, probably during our time, a lot of us would wanted to take up accountancy. So that's what I initially wanted to take as well. And accountancy, as we all know, is not covered by DOST. So I was not initially considering DOST. But when I was looking at the benefits, the opportunities, as a DOST scholar, and with the encouragement of my teachers way back in high school, I was convinced to apply for the DOST scholarship. Maalala ko nga because during that time, application was done per school. So I did not join my classmates who went to apply, and I joined a batch from another school. It just so happened that the teacher in charge in that other school is a friend of my advisor in high school. So I was able to join them, though I'm not a part of their school. So yun, so it was not really my intention to avail of the scholarship. We were given the opportunity to be introduced to the scholarship, but I'm thankful that I made the right decision to grab the opportunity and apply as a DOST scholar. So every time I see my batchmates then who applied and who were eager to be a DOST scholar, we were laughing because from our school, from my batch, there were only two of us who were able to pass as a scholar from the school that I came from the Luacan Annex, but not from the entire City High because there's a good number. And when I went to college, I was able to meet a lot of these other scholars from the other annexes of City High and even from the main campus of City High. So yun.
Okay, so galing pala si Sir sa Baguio City High, Luacan Annex. Sir, actually
Yeah.
ngayon, oo. Sir, madami pong nag-a-apply ngayon from Baguio or Baguio City High din. So, narinig ko po kanina na parang hindi po ninyo first choice ang ano na to, yung course ninyo computer science. So, sir, ano pong may papayo ninyo sa mga nagbabalak mag-apply ng scholarship dito sa DOST? Katulad ng sayo, iba yung gusto mo pero in-applyan mo pa din dito.
Well, probably the good thing we do in my case that I was able to adapt and I tried to consider my future. Impulse lang siguro. Lahat naman tayo when we were, well, for us who are already working, when we were in high school, we have this dream. We wanted to be this, we wanted to be that. I want to take this program. I want to enroll in this school. But we really need to look into what would these actions of us benefit us or not in the future. So yun yung maipapayo ko siguro. So in my case, gustong-gusto kong mag-accountancy. Siguro marami rin sa mga kabataan ngayon gustong mag-take ng isang particular na program, not necessarily accountancy na hindi covered ni DOST. So isipin natin, is this something that we would really be able to do well in the future? Or are there other options that we would still be able to do well, even if it's not our first option? So in my case, computer science is not my first option, though it's in my siguro top 5 list of programs. So aside from computer science, in my top 5 of list, which is also covered by a DOST scholarship during that time, was chemical engineering. I also considered taking up chemical engineering in SLU, and nahikayat din kami noon, karamihan kami na DOST scholars noon, incoming DOST scholars, nahikayat kami mag-take ng BS Physics. Kasi yun ang pinakamalaki ang allowance that time. So yun yung sinasabi ko, impulse. Kasi ang tinitingnan lang natin would be our current. So what would I be able to get from the current situation? So a lot of us were thinking we want to take up BS Physics kasi mataas ang allowance. Pero hindi natin naiisip in the future, masaya kaya ako na natapos ko ang BS Physics? In the future, meron kaya akong magandang buhay pag pinursu ko ang physics? Of course, I'm not saying that you would sacrifice your happiness. We always need to consider our happiness, but let's be realistic. Aside from being happy, we also need to look at our future. So what will these programs that we are considering bring for us? Especially, it was mentioned by some of our initial speakers, the role of technology, the role of technology in our society now. So I'm not saying that you take up computer science, but I'm saying you look at what would this technology bring us in the future. So imagine ninyo ano kaya yung mga magagandang trabaho na magiging masaya kayo in the future na related sa technology. So that's my recommendation for you. Don't just be satisfied with what you are currently in, your current dreams, but also look forward to the future and look at what these programs that you're considering would bring to you. So you should be happy and you should be satisfied in life.
Okay, so napakaganda po ng sagot ni Sir doon. So sa mga nagbabalak mag-apply, sana napakinggan po ninyo yung galing sa ating speaker ngayon. So Sir, pwede po ba ninyong isalaysay sa ating mga manunood ang iyong buhay bilang isang DOST Scholar? Kumusta po ang naging unang taon ninyo sa kolehiyo? May mga adjustments po ba kayong ginawa? And the rest po Sir, bilang isang DOST Scholar nung kolehiyo.
Iyon. Probably, what would make me unique from most of the students would be the independence. Kasi I could recall when I enrolled in college, I was alone, wala akong kasama. So mag-isa akong pumunta sa school, mag-isa akong nagtanong, mag-isa akong nag-process ng enrollment. So everything I did on my own. So it was a challenge, and it was an adventure, and it was a learning process for me. So yun yung siguro masasabi ko na unique sa akin. Though I'm not saying that everybody should be independent. Well, if your parents are willing enough to accompany you and go for the enrollment to go and inquire in the universities, well, that would be better, I would say. And then from my experience as a scholar, I was also able to connect with other DOST scholars. So yun yung siguro isa sa pinaka-importanting I would recommend. So in my case, I was independent, but I relied on other DOST scholars. There were a few DOST scholars during my time in our university, and I'm happy that I am friends with most of them up to now. So some of them are, I would say, close friends now. Yung iba may mga anak na, so you are invited to become the ninong. Yung iba nag-asawa, you were invited to be part of the ceremony and so on. So it's nice to build this relationship, personal relationship with other scholars. So yun yung I would recommend. And I was able to survive my life in the university as a DOST scholar because of these friends that I was able to collect, who are still my friends now. I also have friends not just from UC who are DOST scholars. I also have friends from other universities. So yun siguro yung isang magandang suggestion ko sa mga DOST scholars, because I noticed I've been a DOST scholar coordinator in the university for a few number of years now. I noticed, I'm not sure if it's true for most of the youth now, naging masyadong independent na sila, that they do not have this strong bond connection with other scholars. Well, I'm not saying that you should just be friend with scholars. Hindi ko naman sinasabi na pag hindi scholar yung kaklase mo, you should not consider that person to be a possible friend, a possible close friend, who would be a friend even after you graduate. But it's nice if you are able to connect. So with my friends who are other DOST scholars, I was able to survive, as I mentioned, in college because for projects, silang mga kasama ko. For activities, because I was also active as a student leader when I was in the university. And the other DOST scholars were also officers. So kami yung mga magkakasama, and we were able to build this strong bond. And I would say most of us were able to survive because of that. Even during financial needs, halimbawa may isa sa amin na medyo kinulang ng allowance, tapos yung allowance mo medyo sobra kasi medyo mas nakakaangat ka in terms of financial status. So minsan nagpapautang ka, minsan nagpapahiram ka, minsan kinulang yung pang-tuition ng ibang scholars, so you would shell out, pero babayaran pa rin naman, but you would help each other. So yun yung experience ko na mai-recommend ko with students. Well, this would apply not just for DOST scholars, but for students who are scholars of other agencies or even for non-scholars. So we need to build a bond with trusted people while we are in the university kasi tayo-tayo ang magtutulungan in terms of needs if there are problems.
Ayun, so madami pong nakwento si Sir ng mga karanasan niya. Sir, sa mga naging karanasan po ninyo, mag-share naman po kayo sa mga naging hamon na hinarap ninyo bilang isang DOST scholar. Kasi kanina, yung mga hamon ng mga iba mong kasama. Ngayon naman po, Sir, yung naging hamon mo din bilang isang scholar.
Ayun, probably, I would say I'm lucky probably. Kasi I did not really encounter a lot of hardships and problems when I was a scholar. Siguro I would relate to most of my friends. Number one na problem talaga ng mga scholars would be money. Kasi let's be true. If you are a DOST scholar, there's a certain limit to the amount that the scholarship would provide for you in terms of the tuition and the allowance. Kaya nga every time I am able to connect with my friends, DOST scholars from the other universities, especially from BSU, yun, lagi kami naiingit sa kanila. Buti pa ang mga tag-BSU, buti pa ang mga taga-UP. Kasi yung perang binibigay ni DOST for their tuition fee, minsan sumosobra pa. But if you go to schools, especially private schools, na medyo mas mataas ang tuition, sometimes mag-aabono ka pa. In my case, when I was a scholar for, magkano bang binibigay? Basta less than 10,000 ang binibigay ni DOST for our tuition and fees. Ang tuition and fees namin that time, umaabot kami ng mga 15,000. So, ang ginagawa namin noon, we work hard as a scholar. It's not because you are a scholar, you should be complacent with the requirements. We work hard. Yung mga kasama kong scholars, we work hard because aside from being a DOST scholar, we are targeting academic scholarships because during our time in the university, there's a monetary benefit for academic scholars. So yun, tina-target namin yun noon. Dapat aside from being a DOST scholar, I need to become an academic scholar para yung kulang doon sa scholarship ng DOST, mapupunan ng academic scholarship. And then minsan ginagamit din namin yung allowance namin. So siguro yun yung isa sa mga struggles ng mga karamihan ng DOST scholars who are in usually private universities. So monetary. So we need to be able to strategize. Let's not just be reliant with the monetary benefits that we get from DOST. If we would be able to get other benefits on top of that, then let's grab it. So yun, aside from monetary difficulties, in my case, I was fortunate that I was a consistent academic scholar during my entire stay in the university. So hindi ko naranasan yung kinulang yung tuition fee ko kasi kulang yung binigay ni DOST. But some of my friends may mga nakaranas nun. So we shelled out, we tried to help. So yun, monetary, one of the difficulties. Another, well, I would not say that it was really a problem in my case, but I have some friends who encountered this, yung grade requirement ng DOST. So yun, isa sa mga challenges karamihan ng mga DOST scholars. And even from the students who I handled as the coordinator for DOST scholars in our university. So nag-struggle yung iba na i-meet yung average. I'm not sure if the average was increased, but during our time, it's 85 for our university. Nag-increase na ba, Miss Noviman?
Same lang
Same
po,
pa
Sir.
rin.
Yes, sir.
So yun. So for us to be able to maintain that 85, we had to work together. So yung mga DOST scholars, we pull together, we work together. Pag may projects, kahit hindi kami magkakagrupo, we help each other. Kasi nga, we need to target, each of us should be able to get that average of 85 for us to pass. The better if each of us would be able to get the required average for us to be qualified as academic scholars, kasi makakatulong yun sa atin. So yun yung nakikita kong dalawang pinaka malaking pressure sa karamihan ng mga DOST scholars. Yun nga yung pag kinulang yung allowance or pag hindi na-meet yung academic requirements. So I would say I was lucky during my time kasi I was not able to experience this because number one, as I will always say, because of the friends that I have who are still my friends up to now, the bonding that we were able to build, the bond that we were able to build, and the bonding, the activities, and the working together that we did when we were still students.
So ayun po, sa mga scholars po natin, tandaan po natin ang sinabi ni Sir Jeffrey, help each other. So ang next po nating katanungan ngayon is, Sir, pwede po ba kayong mag-share ng mga most memorable or best memorable moments niyo bilang isang DOST scholar?
Memorable, actually marami. Yan ang marami. In terms of the not so good memories and the good memories, stand out talaga ang mga good memories. Siguro for every 20 good memories, isa lang ang not so good memory ko from my experience as a DOST scholar. So siguro ang number one good memory ko yung bonding namin with the other DOST scholars. Kasi I would recall during that time, we go beyond academic bonding. So sometimes lumalabas kami as a group, we go out, picnic. So I could recall yung aming advisor noon as a DOST scholar. Several times nagpicnic kami sa Janhay. Siyempre sa mga estudyante, parang wow, especially for those who are not from Baguio really, and you would go to these places during those times. So some of you might say, ang corny naman, some of the youth might say now, ang corny naman ng magpicnic. Kasi ang daming pwede nang gawin ngayon. Unlike during those times na kukunti lang ang pwedeng gawin in Baguio, that was 20 years ago, 2001. So wala pang SM noon because SM was open 2002 or 2003, mga ganong years. So we were going out, bonding, picnic, sometimes swimming. So yun yung isa sa mga good memories ko. Sometimes we also do mga overnight activities. Of course, we do overnight because we work on projects. But on top of the projects, yung mga bonding moments like we play cards. So sometimes people would not believe if I would say kaming magkakaibigan mga DOST scholars, we did this, we did that. So a lot of times people would say, talaga, ginagawa ninyo yan? I do not know, there's this label that if you are a DOST scholar or you are a scholar or if you are academically performing, may mga bagay na hindi ini-expect na ginagawa ninyo, na ginagawa ng mga normal na kabataan. Well, I would say ang mga DOST scholars or scholars in general are normal people just like any other student. So sometimes meron yung mga gimmick din with the friends, with the DOST scholar friends. So yun yung isa sa mga unforgettable memories ko. Aside from that, in terms of academics, yung mga competitions. So you're able to go to other universities, even outside Baguio, to join competitions, to join events, ayun. And then siguro ang isa pa would be the label that is attached to you as a scholar. I'm not sure if that is still true now, but during our time, kasi if you are a scholar, especially for some scholarships like DOST, iba ang tingin sa'yo ng mga ibang estudyante. So they look at you with respect probably. They look at you with admiration. So yun yung mga unforgettable memories ko. Yung mga bonding activities with other students, yung mga projects with other students, competitions with other students, and of course the recognition that we were able to get as DOST scholars.
Ano po nang sinabi niyo, sir? Actually, totoo din po. Sabi din po ni Sir Benjo po nung last month, branding din po yung isa po sa experience na din po bilang isang scholar. So sa lahat po ng inyong napagdaanan at naging karanasan, ano po ang pinakamahalagang bagay na itinuro sa iyo ng scholarship na ito?
Well, I would say siguro number one, which would still be related to what I mentioned earlier, one would be independence. So as a DOST scholar, I was able to think and decide for myself with minimal intervention, help from the family, relatives. So yun, so independence would be number one. Number two would be yung bond nga that I was able to build with my friends who are still my friends up to now. So we graduated 2004. That was parang 16, 17 years ago. So for the past 16, 17 years, magkakaibigan kami hanggang ngayon. So ano pa ba aside from being independent, aside from the bonding, siguro yung still related to what I mentioned earlier, yung planning for the future. So yun, isa siguro yun sa mga importante. So not just me, but even my close friends who are also DOST scholars, we were always looking at our future. We were always considering what would be the effect of these actions that we are doing with our future. Kasi during that time, short term lang. If I would do this, what would be its effect to my grades? If I do that, what would be its effect to my scholarship? But eventually, that would grow in you, and you would eventually look at the farther future.
Tama po yung sinabi ni Sir. Let us always make sure that in everything that we do, let's consider yung magiging impact niya sa future natin. So, Sir, meron po kayong contract na napirmahan po nung naging scholar po kayo ng DOST. So, let's talk about po yung service obligation. In exchange po sa mga benepisyo na natatanggap ng isang scholar ay ang obligation ay obligado po silang mag-render ng service obligation. Maari po ba ninyong ikwento ang naging karanasan ninyo while rendering your service obligation?
In my case, parang hindi ko nga siya namalayan eh. Kasi ang service lang naman would be 1:1 if I'm not mistaken. So if you've been scholar for 4 years, the service obligation would also be 4 years. Actually, mabilis lang yan. Hindi ninyo mamamalayan. As a scholar, we were actually thinking of that because during our time when we were still students, usong-uso yung pupunta sa abroad para magtrabaho. So a lot of us were looking into possible employment opportunities abroad. So yun yung isa sa mga naiisip namin as DOST scholars. How would we be able to go abroad if we will be rendering our service obligation? So in my case and even my friends, after we finished the degree program, we looked for a job in the Philippines. Ang maganda nga as a DOST scholar, I could recall there were a lot of invitations. So I'm not sure with the other scholars, but from my experience and from my friends' experience as well, after you graduate, ang daming opportunities na mag-i-invite sa'yo to work. In my case, I was invited, say for example, for those who are in Baguio, you're familiar with Texas Instruments. I was invited by Texas Instruments to apply there twice, and I declined twice. Aside from Texas Instruments, I was receiving invitations from companies in Manila. And siguro ang isa sa mga nag-stand out na invitation is an invitation from Navitaire. Navitaire is a company that works on software development for airlines. It's a Germany-based company, so I was also invited by Navitaire. And yun nga, I actually do not know why and how I ended up as a teacher in the university. Because when I was still a student, hindi naman talaga ako yung top sa aming batch. So probably I might say from my batch, from my group, computer science and IT batch during that time, probably nandun ako sa mga top 3, top 5, but I would not say I am the number 1 in our batch. So I was also surprised because I was invited also by UC to come and teach. So maraming invitation sa akin noon. So I decided, after some thought and consideration, I decided to grab the invitation of UC. Maalala ko pa nga we were also processing our application sa Cytel ngayon. It was then Client Logic. So it was their first time to hire employees in Baguio. That was 2004. And from all these opportunities and from all these invitations, I chose to render my return service as an instructor in the University of the Cordilleras. I would just want to go back to my Client Logic or Cytel application noon. So I also said no to Cytel, to Client Logic. And surprising, noong just a few years ago, siguro 5 years ago, I met one of my former classmate na nagtuloy doon sa Cytel. And ang sweldo na niya nung nagkita kami, nasa mga 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 digits. Yun ang sweldo niya sa isang buwan. So yun, tapos papalit-palit siya ng sasakyan, ang dami niyang mga properties. So wala naman akong regrets. Hindi naman ako nagsisisi na bakit hindi kayo ako nagpunta sa Client Logic? Bakit kaya hindi ako nagpunta sa TI? Bakit kaya hindi ako nagpunta sa Navitaire? So wala naman akong regrets that I'm still with the university. So yun, so I opted to take the teaching position offered by the university and do my return service. So ang iniisip ko lang noon is, while I am doing my return service, I would stay here at UC to teach, but in the future, I would want to venture into other opportunities. And hindi nawala, hanggang ngayon hindi pa rin nawawala yung sa isip ko na i-try ang pumuntang magtrabaho abroad. But my desire to go and work abroad is not as strong as when I was still a fresh grad. So yun, probably because of the task that I have now, probably because of the role that I am doing now in the university, I'm enjoying it, and I'm enjoying that I am able to do my share in educating our youth. So yun. So para ma-compensate ko yung aking desire to go up and work abroad, together with my friends, we always make sure that we go abroad at least once a year. Kung hindi nga lang sana nag-pandemic. So last year was the only year that we were not able to go out. So since mga 2012, 2013, 2011, since that year, we've been going out. So every Christmas break, we are out of the country, just to experience being outside of the country, just to compensate our initial desire to really work abroad. So yun.
So ayun na nga, makikita po natin na si Sir Jeffrey po ngayon is one of the example of being a patriot scholar. And to all of our dear graduate scholars out there, let's learn to love and serve our country tulad po ng ginawa ni Sir Jeffrey, na he still chose to serve our country because nakikita niya siguro that there are lots of opportunities din dito sa ating bayan. So ang mga manonood po sa atin ngayon ay mga magulang, mga kabataan, mga kapwa-kawani serbisyo publiko. Maari po ba ninyong hikayatin ang ating manunood upang itaguyod itong scholarship program ng DOST?
Yeah. Every time I am given the opportunity to talk about my experience and what I could say about the scholarship, I always see to it that I try to tell them my experience, because of course I cannot convince people without giving them concrete proof. I cannot convince people, at not necessarily mine, but my first-hand observation at least of other DOST scholars. So ang kagandahan nga ngayon, lagi kong sinasabi sa mga estudyante, mas maswerte nga kayo ngayon kasi ang dami-daming scholarships, not just DOST. During our time, kukunti lang ang mga scholarships, which I am also reminded when I got the DOST scholarship, I was also invited by TI to avail of their scholarship. So I was called by then our one of the staff in our guidance one of our counselors para i-guide ako to decide, because I was given the option to either continue with my DOST scholarship or drop my DOST scholarship and avail of the TI scholarship, because I was invited to become a TI scholar also that time. Actually, tempting siya. Kasi in terms of the tuition, mas malaki ang binibigay ni TI. In terms of allowance, comparable naman, not so different. But in terms of other benefits, yun nga, mas maraming binibigay si TI. But I opted to stick with the DOST scholarship kasi nga I was thinking of the long term, long run, not just the current. Kasi kung grinab ko yung TI scholarship that time, na-enjoy ko during that time. Mas marami akong nakuha. Pero sa ngayon siguro, I would not be able to brag about it and say I was a TI scholar when I was still a student. Unlike now that I could always say I was a DOST scholar when I was a student. So I always go back to the label. I guess that was also emphasized by the other speakers, the label associated to being a DOST scholar. So pag meron po tayong, since there are parents now, pag meron po tayong mga anak na naghahanap ng scholarship, as I mentioned earlier, maraming scholarships ngayon. Pero tingnan po natin ang mga bagay-bagay like itong scholarship ba na ito, aside from it would be able to help our children now, what would be its continuous benefit? Ano yung tulong na maibibigay niya sa anak ko even after graduation? So yun nga, as a DOST scholar, kahit na hindi na kami scholar, nagagamit pa rin namin yung label. We are still able to connect with other people. Like in my case, DOST Scholar CAR, DOST CAR, I should say, is always connecting to us as scholars. They always invite us. So merong connection. And this connection, aside from it helps you grow, it connects you with other professionals, which in turns would help you grow professionally, na meron din namang monetary benefit. So yun. So I encourage you to look at the benefits that our children will be able to gain by considering and taking up the DOST scholarship. So yun yung gusto kong highlight talaga. Number one would be the bragging rights. Kasi from all these scholarships that I have seen, bihira yung kahit na 30 years after, pwede mo pa rin ipagmalaki na naging scholar ka. Na sa DOST pwede mong gawin yan. Even if you are already 50 years old, and you were a scholar, say for example 40 or 30 years ago, you can always say that you are proud as a DOST scholar. And yun nga, I know as a DOST scholar there are a lot of opportunities that would be opened for our children. Like they may be saying then that if I grab the scholarship offered by this company, I would be employed by that company. But what if I'm not happy with that company? What if I do not want to work with that company? As a DOST scholar, you are not associated to a specific company. But as a DOST scholar, companies would look up to you. Companies would our companies would go after, I should say, companies would go after these DOST scholars, which was an experience in my case. Actually, even after a few years na pag-graduate ko na DOST scholar, meron pa rin ako mga nare-receive. Siguro for the first 5 years, meron pa rin ako mga nare-receive na invitations na laging nakalagay doon as a former DOST scholar. So yun po yung i-consider natin. Ano yung benefit na makukuha ng ating mga anak pag nag-avail sila ng scholarship? Hindi lang yung benefit ngayon, pero ano yung benefit na makukuha nila especially in the future pag nag-graduate na sila.
Ayun, so nabanggit na po ni Sir, maraming salamat sa paghihikayat po sa ating mga manunood. So Sir, sasagutin ko lang po saglit yung mga tanong sa Facebook Live natin. So thank you sa mga FB Live viewers po natin. Thank you for tuning in. So may mga tanong dito regarding na din po sa scholarship, sasagutin po natin in line din sa paghihikayat ni Sir Jeff sa ating lahat. So from, hindi ko po sure kung Sir or Ma'am, GD Tiap. Sir, Madam, ngayong 2021, kailan po ang registration at application ng mga estudyanteng gustong mag-avail ng scholar ng DOST? Yes, for this year, For this incoming school year 2021 to 2022, ang eligible applicants po natin ay yung mga grade 12 that school year. So ang application, hindi pa po siya na-open, pero maybe by June or July, keep posted lang po sa Facebook page natin. We will be posting po yung online application din po pag nag-open na siya. So another question from Sir Alex Sumargo. Ask ko lang po, what is the standard bracket grades to become a scholar? So ito ang magandang tanong. So sabi may grades daw. So actually during application, tama sir, ipo-prove po ni sir ngayon na during the application hindi po nila tinitignan kung ilan or kung ano ang average mo during the application. So basta qualified ka or eligible ka to apply, pwede po. Wala pong grade requirements during the application. It is during the scholarship mismo, yung pagiging isang DOST scholar muna na may mga grade requirement. Parang yung sabi ni Sir kanina na may i-maintain ka na grade during your scholarship years na, not during the application. So yun po, maraming salamat.
Sir Jeff, meron din po pala kaming question and answer galing po sa Secretary po ng Department of Science and Technology na si Secretary Fortunato E. De La Peña po. Sir, i-prepare mo lang JOBS, sir. Tapos, question. Sir, ag-live kami ito lamiman ng Angela.
Base sa iyong karanasan, ang DOST scholarship ba ay nakaka-inspire o nakaka-pressure?
Nakaka-inspire ba o nakaka-pressure ang pagiging DOST scholar? I would say a little bit of both. Nakaka-inspire siya, at the same time, there's also pressure associated to it. So bakit siya nakaka-inspire? Actually, I've mentioned this several times. Kasi kukunti lang, selected lang ang nagiging DOST scholars. Sabi ko nga, when I was in high school, ang dami naming nag-apply as DOST scholars from the campus that I came from, the campus of City High that I came from. Maalala ko nung nag-apply sila noon, 2 jeep sila na pumunta noon. So kung 2 jeep ang pumunta noon, hindi bababa sa mga 30 na tao ang nag-apply doon sa campus lang na pinanggalingan ko ng City High. And from the campus na pinag-applyan ko, ang nagtuloy lang talaga, nakaprocess at nakatapos lahat-lahat ng pagiging DOST scholar, 2 lang kami. So it's inspiring kasi selected lang ang nakakakuha nito. It's also inspiring kasi the label that is associated to it, it is a bragging right that you could use no matter how far you are in the future. Sabi ko nga, I finished the program 16 years ago. Pero hanggang ngayon, lagi ko pa rin sinasabing DOST scholar ako. So, yun yung nakaka-inspire. Nakaka-pressure din siya because of the expectations. Kasi nga, kukunti lang kayo na na-select na DOST scholars. So, there's this expectations from you as a DOST scholar. In our case, when I was still a student, and even now that I am in charge of coordinating the DOST scholars in our university, I always expect much from our DOST scholars. So kapag may mga events, I expect na in-expect din sa amin na mga DOST scholars ang isa sa mga magli-lead. Kapag may mga competitions, kagaya rin ng in-expect sa amin noon, I also expect that the DOST scholars would be on top and are leading. So yun yung nakaka-pressure. And for some, yung pag-maintain ng grades. So in all in all, it's a combination really of nakaka-inspire and nakaka-pressure. Pero as a DOST scholar, nasa sayo kung ano ang mas magpo-prevail. Yung pagiging inspiring ba or yung lagi ka na lang nato-pressure. So the option is up to you to choose which would you want to prevail. But definitely, you would experience both along the way.
Sir, next question po.
Sa iba't ibang available learning opportunities and scholarships, bakit sa tingin mo ay ang DOST scholarship ang priority na dapat i-pursue?
First, I would say the prestige. So that's always number one in my list. The prestige, the label associated to being a DOST scholar. Because there are a lot of available scholarships both from other government agencies and private institutions. Actually, ngayon nga, naglilista kami, tumitingin kami ng mga possible scholarships ng mga estudyante namin. Marami even abroad. ASEAN scholarship, European Union scholarship, American government scholarship, Japanese government scholarship. Ang dami-dami niyan. But I would say DOST should be one of our priority in terms of scholarship. And the reasons are, as I mentioned earlier, number one would be prestige. Number two, a lot of us, especially the young ones, are not yet really prepared and independent enough to go and study abroad. Well, of course, if you are independent and you are capable, magandang mag-aral ka abroad as a scholar abroad at bumalik ka at tumulong ka sa nation building. But since most of our incoming freshmen are not yet that independent, so karamihan ng mga options natin are local scholarships. So I would recommend DOST. So DOST is also one of my top in terms of priority scholarship because DOST has this mandate for us DOST scholars to help our country. So by being a DOST scholar, we are able to help improve the manpower profile in the Philippines, especially in terms of scientists. So we are already moving towards a new economy where wealth of a country is not measured by money, but is measured by the knowledge of its people and the data, information generated by its people. So yun po yung lagi naming sinasabi sa aming mga estudyante. So we need to improve our manpower profile in terms of research, in terms of technology, kasi dyan napapunta ang ating ekonomiya. Look at the countries around the world. There are small countries that are well-known, doing well, and may also be considered powerful, not because they have resources, not because they have the money, but because they are advanced in terms of research. So one good example would be Singapore. Ang liit-liit lang ng Singapore, but Singapore is on top in the world. Hindi dahil sa marami silang natural resources. If you've been to Singapore, kukunti lang ang natural resources nila kasi maliit lang sila na island. Walang mining doon, walang ginto doon, unlike in the Philippines. Pero bakit sila nag-perform well? Because of the quality of their manpower. They have a lot of scientists, they have a lot of researchers, they have a lot of people into technology. So yun. So I recommend you to take up DOST scholarship, consider DOST scholarship, because there is that mandate of DOST from the DOST scholars. And of course, we are encouraged to do service in our nation. So karamihan kasi ng mga other scholarships, ang sinasabi nila, once you graduate, you need to do return service in our institution. So if you become a scholar of one company, you need to do your return service to that company. Pero si DOST hindi yan ang sinasabi niya. Once you graduate, you need to help the country. Not help DOST, not help a specific government, not help the school that you graduate from, but to help the country. So yun yung lagi kong sinasabi. Even if in terms of monetary, DOST is not the highest. even if in terms of studying abroad, DOST is not on top of the list, though DOST also supports students who would want to study abroad. Yun yung gusto ko lang i-highlight, yung reason why DOST would want to encourage youth to avail of the scholarships that they are offering, because DOST would want us to be an active member of our society in improving the quality of life in our country, and in improving the economy, and improving the manpower profile of the country.
Thank you po ulit, sir. So let's proceed to the next question po ulit.
Ang ibang mga estudyante ay nagdadalawang isip tungkol sa DOST scholarship dahil sa service obligation pagka-graduate. Sa tingin mo ba ito ay isang malaking problema o balakid? At ano ang iyong naging experience tungkol dito?
Well, obviously you would know my answer. So my answer would be no. We should not look at the service obligation as a hindrance. Kasi regardless of what scholarship you would be availing, there would always be a return service. So if you avail scholarship of one company, the return service might be for you to work for that company for a certain number of years. So if you avail of a scholarship given by a foreign country, meron ding return service usually yan. Like if you avail scholarship of some countries, ang return service usually would be for you to go back to your own country and do a return service in your country. So we should not look at the service obligation as a hindrance, because no matter what scholarship you would avail, there would always be a return service obligation. Iba-iba nga lang ang scope ng return service obligation. As I mentioned, hindi ninyo mamamalayan yan. In my case, nagulat nga ako because after my service obligation, I received a letter, parang certificate from DOST saying that I've already rendered my return service. Ako mismo yung nagulat, tapos na pala yung return service ko, because DOST is telling me that I've already rendered my return service. So short lang yan, hindi nyo mamamalayan yan. And as I mentioned also, as a DOST scholar, one benefit would be a lot of these companies would come after you. So there are a lot of opportunities in the Philippines. Ang karamihan lang kasi sa atin ang iniisip natin, the return service would hinder us from leaving the country and working abroad. Kasi ang laging mindset natin, malaki ang sweldo sa outside of the Philippines. Well, that's true. Malaki ang sweldo outside the Philippines. Pero naisip ba ninyo, gaano naman kamahal ang mabuhay doon? Like if you go to Singapore, it's true that the salary of people working in Singapore would sometimes be times 4, times 5 of what we get in the Philippines. Pero naisip nyo ba, pero gaano naman kamahal ang mabuhay doon? Baka naman equal lang. Dahil sa taas ng sweldo doon at taas ng cost of living doon, yung susweldohin mo doon na suma total after deducting your expenses from your salary, pareho rin lang naman ang kikitahin mo dito sa Pilipinas. So these are things that we need to consider. So as I mentioned nga earlier, since company would come after you, marami kang options. So kung let's be realistic, a lot of scholars would want to graduate, to work, to earn money for their families. So since you are a DOST scholar and a lot of companies would come after you, marami kang pamimilihan ngayon. So kung ang priority mo talaga is to work to help your family monetarily, pilihin mo yung mga company within the Philippines that would give you the best benefit. So the return service obligation should not be looked at as a hindrance, but as an opportunity for you to grow while you are still in the Philippines. Well, if in the future talagang gustong-gusto mong mag-abroad, at least yung experience mo would help you if you go abroad. And I hope that all these people who were former DOST scholars who are already working abroad in the near future or before they retire, at least they come back and continue serving the country.
Thank you po ulit, sir. Proceed po ulit tayo sa next question.
Bigyan mo kami ng mungkahi kung papaano ang ating mga DOST scholars ay mahihikayat natin na manatili sa bansa at yung iba ay mahikayat natin na maglingkod bilang mga public servants.
So yun, as a DOST scholar, so why is it important for us to consider, so yun yung tinatanong actually yung secretary, why is it important for us to consider staying in the Philippines and continue serving in the Philippines? As I was saying earlier, well, this is based on my experience and based on my interaction with people who went abroad. Number one reason why a lot of people would go abroad would be, ang lagi nilang sinasabi, would be number one, opportunity. But I disagree with that. There are a lot of opportunities in the Philippines. Kailangan lang nating hanapin kung nasaan talaga itong mga opportunities na ito. But there are a lot of good opportunities in the Philippines. People would always say walang trabaho sa Pilipinas. Maraming trabaho sa Pilipinas. Kailangan lang nating hanapin kung nasaan itong mga to. Or sometimes we just need to enable ourselves. So for us to be qualified for these job opportunities. Yun lang naman ang kailangan nating gawin. And if only all these DOST scholars and even scholars of other government agencies would not leave the Philippines, stay in the Philippines, and work together to improve the quality of education in the Philippines, the quality of research in the Philippines, the quality of manpower profile in the Philippines, then that would have an effect in our economy. Ekonomiya lang naman natin ang kailangan nating problemahin, not really going abroad because there's no job in the Philippines, not necessarily going abroad because there are no opportunities in the Philippines. There are a lot of opportunities. It's just that there are only a few people opening these opportunities for the Filipino people. So if only all these DOST scholars and scholars of other government agencies would stay in the Philippines, work hard to improve, as I mentioned, the quality of research that we are doing, the quality of education that we have in the Philippines, that would have an effect on our economy. So look at these countries that are performing well now. They are not necessarily rich in terms of natural resources, but they are performing well. Why? Because they have a good pool of manpower. Yun yung number one. Kasi ang nangyari sa Pilipinas, lahat ng mga magagaling natin, after the return service, siguro umaalis sila ng country. So walang naiiwan para i-improve ang ating quality of education, quality of research in the Philippines. If only we do not go out, we stay, and then we work together, well, at least siguro we would sacrifice, not in our lifetime, but in the lifetime of our children or our grandchildren. Baka maganda ulit ang economy ng Philippines. We were able to do that before. So we were considered to be one of the best, if not the best economy in Southeast Asia, siguro 50, 60 years ago. So sa mga kabataan, I want you to read your history. Ngayon, hindi na. We are considered to be one, if not the sick man of Asia. So anong nangyari? Nagkaroon kasi tayo ng drain of manpower, drain of experts. So kasi lahat ng magagaling natin pumupuntang abroad, which reminded me, I was fortunate that I was able to get a scholarship and went to the University of California, Berkeley. So I stayed there for 1 semester to observe, to study. And then nakita ko karamihan ng mga nandun na magagaling ang mga Pilipinong nandun. There's even this one scientist who is considered as the Bill Gates of the Philippines. Andun siya sa California. Ang dami niyang businesses doon. Meron ngang pinatayong building doon na ipinangalan sa kanya yung mga halls. So marami tayong magagaling. Kung sana lahat ng mga magagaling natin hindi umaalis ng Pilipinas, we would be able to improve our quality of education, quality of research. So as I was saying earlier, and I would always repeat this, look at these countries that are doing well now. They do not necessarily have the natural resources, but they have skilled manpower, enabled manpower. They have manpower with good profile in terms of research, science, and technology. So sana lahat ng mga scholars, isipin natin yun. So kung, well, let's be probably you might say, but we need to earn, so we need to do a balance talaga. So mahirap din namang sabihin natin na as a scholar you need to stay in the Philippines or you need to do this without considering the economic status of the family of the scholar, because in the first place these scholars applied for the scholarship because they want to graduate, for them to have the opportunity to improve their lives in the future. So kailangan lang nating i-balance na aside from we are growing in terms of monetary economy for our family, we are also helping our country, because in the long run everybody would benefit from it.
Salamat po ulit, sir. And now we have our last question po.
Ngayon ay isang dean ka na at masasabing ambassador of the DOST. Anong advice ang maibibigay mo sa mga kabataan natin ngayon, including our scholars, during this time of the COVID-19 pandemic?
So yun. I will always say this even to my students, because even if I am now in a position in the university, I still handle some courses in our university just for me to be aware of what is happening inside the classroom, just for me to be aware of what's happening with the classes, with the students, for us to be able to plan and improve the programs that we are offering. So I always handle. In our case, I usually handle courses in the computer science program. So lahat ng aming mga BSCS students, nagiging teacher nila ako, because these are the courses that I handle. So I always tell my students that during this pandemic, actually even before and even after this pandemic, kahit matapos itong pandemic na ito, applicable pa rin itong sasabihin ko, we need to find ways to continue learning. And we always need to work for us to be able to reach our dreams. So it's not because we are in a pandemic, we would stop. We would just stay home and do nothing. So mag-aral pa rin tayo. So actually kahit na walang pandemic, kapag wala tayong ginagawa, it's always fun to learn. It's always fun to learn new things, acquire new skills, and acquire new knowledge. But since we are under a pandemic right now, I always encourage my students to continue reaching for your dreams, continue learning. So kung in terms of the degree program, there are a lot of students now who are not enrolled because they do not want to go through the flexible learning mode of delivering courses. So karamihan naman, not karamihan naman, but there's a fraction among our students who do not want to study online, who do not want to study through flexible mode of delivery. So they are not enrolled. And every time we ask them why they are not enrolled, they would always say, we are gonna wait for the return of the face-to-face. So ang lagi kong sinasabi, kung hihintayin nyo ang return ng face-to-face, natapos na ang isang taon, and we are expecting na hindi tayo mag-face-to-face in the near future. Worst case nga, baka hindi pa tayo mag-face-to-face in the next 1 or 2 school years more. So does that mean that you would be stagnant for 3 years? Sayang naman yung 3 taon. So grab the opportunity. And if you feel that what you are getting is not enough because of the limitations, of course, let's be realistic as well. There are limitations, especially number 1 in the Philippines would be infrastructure. Not all of us would have good internet connection. So if we feel that we are not able to maximize what we should be learning, we are not able to gain all the things that we should be gaining while we are inside the classroom, then we should do our initiatives. So kung sa tingin mo yung tinuro ni teacher kulang, o di mag-aral pa tayo on our own, i-research natin kung ano sa tingin natin yung dapat itinuro ni teacher na hindi na ituro ni teacher. Well, that is true because there's a mandate from the commission that because of the limitations of flexible learning, limitations of online learning, there is not really a reduction, but there is a focus on the basics. There is a focus on the essentials. So meaning, while we are doing learning online and flexible learning, what we should target to teach our students are the basics and the essentials. Unlike if we are in a traditional classroom, sometimes we go beyond. So these are our lessons for today, for this term. This is our topic for today. Sometimes we go beyond. So on top of the topic, we discuss other things which are usually not done. So these are things that our students should be able to develop themselves, being independent. So yun din. But of course, we also need to consider that aside from seeing to it that we do not stop learning, we should also be conscious on our health. We should always abide by the health protocols and always be safe. Yun naman ang pinaka-importante. Kasi kahit na nagtutuloy tayong nag-aaral, kung napabayaan naman natin ng ating health, and that would have a not so good effect for us in the future. So there should be a balance. We should continue learning. We should continue to achieve our dreams, but at the same time, we should be conscious and take care of ourselves. So ang dami-daming opportunities to learn now. Mag-online ka lang, ang dami-dami ng pwedeng pag-aralan. Even teachers now, sometimes yung mga teachers, when we start with the pandemic, medyo hesitant din sila. But right now, based on my experience, the faculty members in our college, they are free for consultation, which is not usually happening during the face-to-face. During the face-to-face, may limit lang yan. Pwede ka lang mag-consult ng ganitong oras, ng ganitong araw. Ngayon, kahit anong oras, kahit anong araw, pwede mo nang i-consult ang teacher mo. So, ang dami-daming changes which we could take advantage for us to continue learning, continue reaching our dreams without, of course, sacrificing our health.
Okay, so ayun po. Maraming salamat po Sir Jeffrey sa pagbigay po ng oras niyo sa amin. At maraming salamat din po sa Secretary po ng Department of Science and Technology na si Secretary Fortunato P. De La Peña sa binigay na din po na oras para samahan po tayo sa araw na ito. Meron po tayong isang katanungan sa ating Facebook Live. Ang sabi po dito, may scholarship po ba for masters? Actually, yes. So we have scholarship po for masters and PhD. Kindly visit po yung website ng SEI at www.sei.dost.gov.ph. Sa kwento din po ni Sir Jeffrey, marami po tayong mga napulot na aral. Atin pong balikan ang mga aral na sinabi niya po kanina. Tawagin po natin ngayon si Ma'am Alice.
We are truly inspired by the sharing of Sir Jeff. We just want to share some takeaways for today's episode. So from his sharing, in terms of choosing scholarship grants, consider doing long-term planning. So we need to plan for the future, look into your actions that can possibly affect your future. So yun po yung number one. Next one is be independent. Another one, build personal relationship or bond with your co-scholars and your friends. You need to work hard. We also need to be proud as a DOST scholar. There are lots of opportunities for being a DOST scholar. Companies will even look for you. And then continue reaching for your dreams and continue learning. So that's all po. I know there are other learnings which you took note. Let these learnings serve as our inspiration.
Thank you so much po Ma'am Alice. Bilang pasasalamat sa mga karunungan at mga aral na ibinigay ninyo po sa amin, Sir Jeff, hayaan niyo po kaming handugan kayo ng pagkilala sa mga naiambag ninyo, hindi lamang sa DOST, kundi sa ating bansa. May I now present po yung Certificate of Appreciation. Republic of the Philippines, Department of Science and Technology, Cordillera Administrative Region, awards the Certificate of Appreciation to Sir Jeffrey S. INGOSAN, in grateful acknowledgement of his invaluable inspiration, dedication to public service, and commitment as a DOST scholar, given this 30th day of April 2021 during the DADAT DOST Scholar, a DOST Scholar Story, held at DOST-CAR Regional Office, signed by Dr. Nancy A. Bantog, the Regional Director of DOST-CAR. Mayroon din po kaming munting regalo o token para sa oras na binigay ninyo po sa amin. Ibibigay na lang po namin sa office ni po, sir, by next week.
Upang formal na tapusin ang ating programa, pakinggan din po natin ang ating Assistant Regional Director for Technical Services, Dr. Pepita Is Pikpikan.
Thank you, Novi. To our Honorable Secretary Fortunato de la Peña, our guest resource speaker, Mr. Jeffrey INGOSAN, the University Scholarship Coordinators, US Scholars, DOST-CAR family led by our Regional Director, Dr. Nancy A. Bantog, and the Provincial Science and Technology Directors. DOST-CAR Scholarship Coordinator, Ms. Alice Balacqua, with the scholarship unit staff who facilitated this activity. All the listeners and viewers, good morning to all. In behalf of the DOST-CAR, we thank everyone for your participation that made this month's DADAT the DOST Scholar successful. We highly appreciate the inspiration, participation, and support of our Honorable Secretary Fortunato de la Peña and our Regional Director, Dr. Bantog. We congratulate and highly appreciate the participation and sharing of Sir Jeffrey, who is among the successful and exemplary models of DOST Scholar graduates. Thank you, Sir Jeffrey, for engaging in this DADAT the DOST Scholar. You are a testimony that things become possible with perseverance and commitment to your goals and to the objectives of the DOST Scholarship Program. You have surpassed the challenges during your DOST Scholarship, and what you are today inspires not only the current scholars and potential scholars, but all the listeners and viewers. You are one of our notable models for the scholars and soon-to-be scholars to emulate. To all the listeners and viewers, we hope you were inspired. To the potential scholars, we hope you were encouraged to aspire as DOST scholar and become one of the future researchers, engineers, or scientists. As future DOST scholars and future DOST scholar graduates, you will help increase the science and technology human resources in the country. As Secretary de la Peña said, let us continue to be champions of science, technology, and innovation, not only in the Cordillera region, but in the whole country as well. We look forward to more testimonies of success from other DOST scholar graduates and then in the next series of DADAT the DOST Scholar. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much po, Ma'am Tita. To the viewers, para po malaman po kung paano mag-apply sa scholarship program ng DOST, bisitahin lang po natin ang website ng Science Education Institute at www.sei.dost.gov.ph o sa Facebook page ng Science Education Institute. Pwede rin po kayong tumawag sa 422-0979 or mag-text sa 0907-913-2231 o pwede din po ninyong i-message ang official Facebook page ng DOST-CAR. Pwede nyo din pong mapanood ang recorded video po ng episode natin for today through our YouTube channel po sa DOST-CAR. Samahan niyo po ulit kami sa next episode ng aming DADAT the DOST Scholar sa buwan ng Mayo. And to all of our viewers, huwag niyo pong kalimutang i-fill up ang ating evaluation link na nasa comment section po natin. And I hope po we will enjoy the rest of the day. Salamat po ulit, Sir Jeffrey, for giving us your time. Good morning to everyone po.